a sudden, I found myself in love with the world. So there was only one thing that I could do, was ding-a-ding-dang, my dang-along-ling-long.
Rolling?
3, 2, 1.
Oh, we ready? Okay, welcome to Monday again.
Monday.
Kirk.
Happy Monday.
We have an additional guest today. Yeah, introduce yourself.
I'm Victor, and I teach philosophy, so I met Kirk that way, and we'll see what we have to say.
Yeah, so that'll be an interesting spin on the things we go over today. All right, Kirk, what do you got?
Well, we're always waxing philosophic around here, so,
Yeah.
we figure we'd bring in an expert. Well, deaths in the news. Try to say that quick 10 times. So Neil Simon, dead, 91.
Yeah.
John McCain, dead, 81,
Yeah.
something like that.
Died on the same day that Ted Kennedy died of the same thing. Just a fact.
Coincidence?
So he went off of treatment a couple days prior. I think it was just
Saturday.
knowing that his doctors probably said, this is it.
I wonder if he has any freezer burn on him. Because maybe they stuck him in a freezer so they could...
Who, McCain?
Yeah, because now they've got to name out, the governor gets to call in the next, senator to replace him. And I think there was some sort of time limit on that before he could do that. But, hey, that's my tinfoil coming out again.
Yeah. No, so he's in there for quite some time, 6 terms, I think. John McCain.
And let's see, what's the other one? We had, Aretha. Aretha's gone. And it was weird how that one went. It was like, oh, she's on her deathbed. And then 2 days later, they're saying, oh, she's fine. She's up. She's moving around. She's all good. She's dead.
Did you see the Madonna tribute to herself?
Madonna did a tribute to
No,
Aretha?
so they had the Video Music Awards, I think, the next day or the day after, and there was a tribute to her, but it was just Madonna talking about herself for about 20 minutes straight.
Girl power, right?
Well,
Speaking of girl power, gal down in Dallas, I believe DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area, she is now suiting up with the high school football team, and she is playing football with the boys. Her name is Maddie Martin.
is she, what's her position?
I did not catch that. She's not a kicker. I'll tell you that, because I've seen it where they've had the kickers, but she's out on the field throwing it around. I did not catch the position.
Did they say her stats or anything? Is she a big girl or?
She looked like she was a good size for a high school girl.
So she just got in. She's going to plow through all the boys.
Yeah,
She'll probably do well.
I hope she does.
Yeah, everyone's going to be afraid to touch her.
Yeah, that could be. That could be one reason why. Or maybe she's just
Just give Maddie the ball.
give Maddie. Yeah,
Look at that. She's just running right through him.
Give Maddie. Look at nobody's touching her. They're all within 6 feet.
Oh, good luck to her. That's great.
Good luck to her. Hopefully she plows through some boys.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got. So Neil Simon, the Odd Couple guy, he had a lot of stuff. That guy actually had 4 plays on Broadway at once back in the 60s. I mean, that guy was a playwriting machine.
Yeah, he was.
Mm-hmm.
I love The Odd Couple myself. I mean, originally, what was it? Walter Matthau was in the original play. And then they did the movie after it with Jack Lemmon. And that is just a classic movie.
Right, but then they did the show. Was there a show on The Odd Couple?
I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. And then there was the one with the actual TV series, right?
Right.
Yeah, with Jack Klugman and Tony Randall.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Yeah, and that ran for many seasons.
It did.
That had a long life. I mean, they're still playing the
But
reruns.
Lemon and Matthau ended up doing movies together later, like Grumpy Old Men.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that was quite a pair.
Yeah, they were funny. Yeah,
They could play off each other very well.
yeah, they're dead too.
This is the death episode,
Death zone.
by the way. And then we had, well, there we go. Nice segue for the next one, which was a Chinese doctor. What was his name? He's an anesthesiologist. Call
Un?
Kim Sun. Call Kim Sun. He killed his wife using a yoga ball filled with carbon monoxide. So he's an anesthesiologist. He's having an affair on his wife. He wants to get a divorce. She says no. So he fills up a couple of yoga balls, throws them in the trunk. She's driving around. Yoga balls deflate. She gets carbon monoxide poisoning. Dead.
Gives me a good idea. Except with some helium.
Now that would be fun.
Stick it in the faculty
Or
meeting.
so you go out with a high pitched voice.
Very
So
creative.
what did he do? Just poke a hole in them, and they were quietly releasing.
They were just quietly releasing like a silent but deadly sitting in the trunk.
All she had to do was open the window, but you would notice it.
No, you just kind of get a little drowsy. But the thing that kind of implicated him was the fact that his daughter was in the car with the wife, and he accidentally killed his daughter.
Oh, that's
It's bad planning.
well.
He was like, "Honey, you need to stay home and do your homework." No. And so the police started looking into that. So yeah, he's on trial. He's in China, whatever they call a trial over there is. And I imagine he's probably going to be one of those guys in the ditch with the guy with the AK at the back of his head thing, probably pretty soon. That whole deal. So happy Monday. What else we got? On the lighter side, on the astrophysicist side, there's some guys out at Cornell University. I think that's where Mr. Hawkins, wasn't Hawkins from
I think
studying-
he
Cornell?
was Cambridge.
Oh, that was Cambridge. Okay. So Cornell.
Well, he's dead too.
Oh, yeah. Another dead guy.
Just throwing things
People
out
are
there.
dropping like flies. What's up with this? Man, lucky to be alive, I think. All right, so we got these physicists think that they've spotted the ghosts of black holes from another universe. So this is like some heavy space stuff going on here. But they have these black holes or remnants of black holes that they're finding. They're starting to think that they're from the previous universe that existed before
Before the Big Bang.
Before the Big Bang.
Yeah, I would argue that certainly there was something prior to the Big Bang, if you believe in that theory. I also read something a couple weeks ago that there was no such thing as black holes, that they actually don't exist at all. And by the way, from last week, I also heard aspirin was really bad for you today.
Aspirin?
Well, just to add to the things that doctors don't really know about, meaning
Oh, the good for you, bad for you.
good for you, bad for you
Yeah.
stuff. We had a couple more examples.
Okay.
See, it was the
Carbs.
carbs.
Well, it started with carbs and then milk and eggs and coffee and the things that they kind of go back and forth about. It's good for you, good, bad for you. No, today aspirin is bad for you.
Black holes are bad for you too, I think.
Second,
Black holes are bad for you too. I
black
think.
holes are bad for you too. Yeah, I wouldn't
Very
want to get
bad.
caught up in those if they exist. Apparently, so you're saying that they're seeing remnants of black holes that once existed.
Correct. And then they fizzled out after a period of time.
That were potentially from a previous
Universe.
universe
Right.
prior to the Big Bang.
Prior to the Big Bang. So they find this, but what the interesting theory was that they mapped out on this, and this was on, space.com, I think it was. But anyway, so I'll back into it. So basically they were saying, okay, so we find these remnants, and what we believe happens is that when you have a black hole, black holes happen all the time. And what their theory is that the numbers of black holes in the previous universe, eventually they just there were so many of them that it was nothing but black holes sucking everything up. Then the universe kind of like, and then it blew up again. So, black holes self-perpetuating. Next thing you know, you got another universe.
But these particles that are emitting from the black holes, aren't they supposed to be massless?
Yes, and timeless.
Supposedly.
Gravitons and photons.
That is right.
So how do you get the mass that's required for the stuff that the Big Bang bangs?
Back up for a second. So black holes will suck up actual matter,
Right.
hypothetically, right?
If they exist.
If they exist, right? Keep going backwards, right? Then it would dissipate, or that matter is just now. Not that we're all science experts, but
From what I understand, it's kind of like matter falls into the black hole, but there's too much matter falling in, and so the excess matter splashes off. Some of it gets sucked in, some of it splashes off, and this is where you get your photons and gravitons.
yeah, I have some of those at my house.
So it's kind of like drinking a bunch of tea and then just being given a thimble to do your business, and you're going to get some spray.
If they exist at all.
The thimbles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Giant thimbles floating through space. All right, that's enough space for today.
Well,
That's
I'm
enough
just
science.
curious. What is your thought? What is your thought? Let's say the Big Bang actually did occur, right? What is your thought process about? It's difficult for the brain to process the idea of a beginning and an end, right? Or infinity, if you will, right? So our minds are made to think that if the Big Bang did occur, that it occurred from an event or from something. And what are your thoughts about what was there prior to that occurring?
From what I understand, and again, I'm not a physicist, but
Sure.
it seems as though that there's just some infinitesimally small compressed bit of matter. So the question is, where does that occur, or where does that come from? And it seems one theoretical option is Hawking radiation, right? And Hawking radiation, from what I gather, is from these putative black holes, should they happen to exist. These two particles, one positive, negative, escape, and usually annihilate each other, but every now and then one particle manages to escape. And so I would assume then that the material out of which the stuff that the Big Bang is banged comes from that. But then this begs the question even further: where do the particles that emerge from these black holes come from? And so it seems to be just a constant pushing the envelope back. Well, you get an explanation for the stuff from the Big Bang, but where does that stuff come from? Oh, Hawking radiation. Where does that come from?
Right.
From black holes. Where does that come from?
Right. You keep going backwards.
Right.
So, I mean, because generally people think of one of two ways, either the God theory, if you will. I'm not going to get into all that, but it was created and so on and so forth.
Right.
And the other is the Big Bang
Right.
theory, if you will.
Right.
Not including the television show, but but even that would seemingly have to have started somewhere. And obviously in our lifetimes, or maybe never in humankind, will we ever figure all this out. It's much too complex. And
Well, I mean, it seems that's why there's a difference between physics and metaphysics, right? I don't know if we know what we mean when we speak of metaphysics. Oftentimes we think of tarot cards, hand reading, and the stuff that you have at Barnes & Noble under that rubric, but physics tells us, it seems, how things happen, but not why they are.
right.
And so it seems that there's still a more fundamental question: is, okay, well, whatever the mechanisms and the processes by which the Big Bang erupts, whether it's a creative act or some sort of physical phenomenon, why is there something to be acted upon in the first place? And to me, it seems like that's an interesting question. Stephen Hawking, it seems, thinks that you don't need God ultimately, right, to account for that. But I don't know. There seems to be something missing from the equation nonetheless.
Or a few things.
Or a few things, yeah.
Or
Freedom, for example. Right, he thinks there's no such thing as freedom. And so
freedom of what?
free will. And so everything can ultimately be determined based on the interaction of particles. And so, I can understand what's going on in your body from a biochemical perspective. That in itself is going to be reducible to some sort of course, chemistry, but then you have different interactions with atoms, so on and so forth. Those atoms are determined by the forces of nature, four laws. And so ultimately, Hawking thinks if you had a computer massive enough, you would be able to impute or compute all the variables and determine exactly what you do at this very second. So freedom is just a kind of label that I attach because that's the calculating power is so vast, I can't do it. And so for shorthand, I just say freedom. But really, there is no freedom.
I have read about his some of his thoughts around free will before. I'm not sure if I've taken a side or not because I'm not sure it's as binary as that, and certainly the things that he put out there are theoretical as well, to the best of his understanding.
Like black holes.
So
Hawkins was an avid atheist, wasn't he?
yeah,
I think so. I mean, what do you mean by theist, right? And so what is the God that you're rejecting if you're an atheist? And I think that's...
I think he was rejecting the existence of a power of that being at all, that it existed at all.
Right.
Going back to your point about what happened prior to the Big Bang, what happened in black holes, and so on and so forth.
So,
that there was I don't know if you want to call it a superpower being of sorts that existed ever.
And I think that's part of the problem, right? When we say he's an atheist, well, that's the rejection of God. But what do we mean by God? Do we mean the God of the scientific explanation, the God of the gaps? Do we mean some kind of force of nature? What do we mean by God? And it seems that he has this notion that the God he's rejecting is a God that plays a scientific role, right? So when you look at ancient cultures, and you have Aristotle, and he looks up to the heavens and he sees the moon moving, the sun moving, the stars moving. Well, what's the reason for that? Well, they're on celestial spheres. You just can't see them because they're crystal. So why do these spheres move? Oh, they desire. What do they desire? Well, like anyone desires a cold beer on a hot day, you move, so you're drawn towards it. And they desire the gods. What are the gods? Just these ultimate cosmic principles. And so if you understand gravity, as Newton comes along and describes it, you don't need this anymore. And so the question is this the God that different cultures, different religions, different peoples have in mind or not? So I think when Hawkins affirms that he's an atheist, I think he's going to say, I reject the God hypothesis, the scientific God, but is that the only God that qualifies for the title? I don't know.
My understanding, I could be, and I'm going to be corrected, I'm sure, by somebody, is that, so generally I think we could argue that without statistics in front of us, that the majority of atheists, even though there are an infinite number of variables of type of atheists, simply, the majority at least, reject the God theory, meaning that God didn't create all of this.
Right.
Either it did or science did, or I'm not religious. I'm not a religious person, so I don't believe that I'm going to die and see the pearly gates and so on and so forth. And that is the generalism of atheism. I think Stephen Hawking's version of it was much more scientific in nature, about not believing that a super divine power had created all of this, but that it came from science itself, which is hard to process. Because
what is science?
Because you keep going backwards and always want to ask yourself, well, it's the question of infinity, of sorts. Meaning, if there is such a thing as infinity, it's not something that a human brain can process. That things don't ever end. The sky never stops. People would theorize that the universe is expanding.
Sure.
Right.
And it's accelerating too.
It's an acceleration. That's faster and faster at every moment. But then you could go on to the other side of it and say, what is it expanding into? right? Doesn't it need space to go? Or is it being created on its path?
Right.
Answers we're not going to have today, obviously, but even discussing the concepts of infinity, and I think from my understanding of his belief and my a little bit of reading about Stephen Hawking on that particular topic, is that not only that he was not going to die and go to heaven, but that it wasn't that the universe as we know it, and whatever other the composition of everything that we see was not created by a super being, if you will, or beings, or whatever you want to call
it's
it,
just
whatever
energy.
gods would be, right? Energy.
It remains constant.
And then what's energy, right?
Exactly.
So,
Where does it come from?
We stop there, right? We'll get back to it in a bit. What else you got that's...
I ran out of topics there. I mean, I was like looking at the universe within the universe there for a second.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, because I think about this often, and I think it's an interesting angle on the science part, and I think that we could probably get into the philosophy a little bit from here. When you look up at the sky tonight, let's say we've got clear skies, okay, and you and I have talked about this before, and please correct me where I'm wrong, for anyone who might know. When you're looking up at the sky, you're essentially looking into an infinite number of images at any given moment, right? But since we're here for such a short period of time, they don't change very often. I'll give you an example. If you're looking at a star that exists, let's say, just for the purpose of the audience, 1 million light years away, that star may, depending on its age and its
May be
brightness,
dead,
and so may very well be gone right now. Now, if you're looking at a star that is 20 million light years away, and depending on its age, it could very well be there or not be there now. Well, when you look at the night sky, you're actually looking at an infinite number of images, none of which are singular. Does that make sense? Meaning you're looking at, if you're looking at something that's 1 million light years away, then that light is getting to you at this time. If you're looking at something at 100 million light years away, it is getting to you at this time. So as you look up into the sky, you're looking at an infinite number of images that comprise themselves as a single image in the moment.
Sure.
But that image was never actually there as we're looking at it. It never existed that way. Are you following?
I do. Yeah. Now I get it. Yep.
All right. So, it never existed that way because the stars that you're seeing, many of which are aged or gone at this juncture, were not there when another star that you can see is there.
Right.
So it's actually not a reality what you're looking at.
But the light is.
The light part of it is because it's now achieving its goal of reaching your eyeball at that moment. But what you're actually looking at is not actually there.
Does that become a time and perception?
I mean, some of it's still there, but it's not
yeah,
where it was.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, that moment is very unique.
Well, it's
Never going to be that
it's
same
so
moment.
unique that it's in the millisecond. But since since that timing is so lengthy and our lives are so short, it doesn't appear to have changed in your lifetime, my lifetime, for that matter, for generations, if not for thousands of years.
Thus, you can have constellations.
Right, because the constellations appeared just as they did 1,000 years ago when they were studied by them then, by astronomers and astrophysicists then. Because 1,000 years compared to the millions that it took to get here has not changed in any measurable capacity.
But if we start traveling in that, and I think there's been a few movies done on that, right? So you start traveling in space, you get out there far enough, eventually that stuff starts to change, right?
Oh,
You start moving fast enough.
Well, yeah, he got.
You'd
it
have to
going
be
fast
hauling
enough.
ass.
Yeah. Theoretical light speed.
You'd
Like
have to
that
be
one.
hauling ass to see it change. Otherwise, it's going to still appear the same and to be there.
We're getting lots of theories on black holes and all that other stuff. Who's working on the light speed engine? We got to get some people
Elon
on
Musk.
that. He floated an electric car out in space. I don't know if that had quite
Step
had
one.
the pulse engine on it that it would be needed. But yeah, who's working on that? We got to find out who that guy is and bring him in. Talk to him.
Need to start folding space.
This room would probably fold in on his brain. Maybe it's a gal too.
So how do you process that in your mind? Or do you think about it that way?
I guess I don't process it because that's a relatively highly scientific approach. And
I'm a highly scientific guy.
well, yeah, but that's not.
I just look up in the sky and figure it out the
that's-
math.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, but that's not one's lived perception, right? I mean, yeah, you can take a step back, but that's an abstraction, right? When you're sitting up there and you look at the moon, perhaps that catches your eye, and then you look at the surrounding stars. And I don't know. I mean, perhaps if one is a scientist and does this for a living, he's used to, or she's used to this kind of attitude. But I think most people simply gaze up and have a sense of wonder, right? And then that in itself generates questions. Well, what am I seeing here? What's going on? I think probably a lot of people are going to look up and say, especially if it's out in the country where there are no city lights, and just marvel at the beauty of it, if there exists such a thing as the beauty of it. But so I think the question you're asking, or at least the way in which you're processing it, is a kind of second step, right? I don't think that's the immediate reaction that most people would have to just the
So
experience.
thinking about it in that capacity,
Right. And the second order theoretical capacity.
right? Because but it would be the equivalent of equating the Earth to being flat,
Right.
which it's not. I mean,
But
so-
that is our experience, right? I mean, that's our ordinary experience.
correct.
And so I think there's
Right. Your everyday driving,
the sense of the
you're
life
not
world,
affected, right?
right? The sense of the life world in which I can put something on this table and it's going to remain, or I put something on the ground and it's going to remain. But we know quite clearly
Right.
the curvature of the Earth. But that's not the way in which we ordinarily relate to it. That's a kind of scientific account that again is secondary and theoretical.
Right. So most people would gaze at the stars and think, okay, this is an image that is beautiful and fascinating and all that kind of stuff. Well, let me bring up a conspiracy before we get into the philosophy of it.
Black holes.
Well, a conspiracy that it doesn't exist at all.
Okay.
I know Kirk will enjoy that one.
I'm sorry. I was gazing in wonder at the sky, wondering how
When you
small
look,
I am
when you look
in
at,
the
when
context.
you look out tonight, realize what you're looking at is not an image. It's not a static. That might be the better way to say it. It's not a static image of any one moment. It's a unique view.
It's a dynamic reality.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I can't help but ever feel really small when you start thinking about that. And I don't mean like, blazing up a doobie. Wow, I'm small, man. I mean, you're looking at it and you start wondering, why am I here? What is my relevance in the universe?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that the universe is infinite, knowing that this universe may or may not be here. I may not be here for very long.
You won't be here for very
Oh,
long.
you
What
won't be here
am I
long.
doing here? Why am I here? I sit there and I watch the satellites go over and I go, dang, we put that satellite up there.
Oh, scientifically, I'll give you a quick answer. You're here because you're just a cell, or a series of cells,
I'm a big meat bag.
and that you're an animal, and everything that is here will be gone at some juncture. That's the simple answer. I don't think we're. This is my opinion, as human beings. That I'm not. I'm sure you may have a different view, given your
Maybe.
studies, and I respect that. But I'm not sure that we're here to do too much at all, other than pass through. And
But where are we going? Are we just going to the dirt
I,
nap?
No, I think we're just passing through. And when you look at the infants, the time continuum, if you will, if there is such a thing as that. Everything is theoretical today, so we'll have to put some parameters around it. But, obviously we could say we're a speck or piece of dust or dust in the wind or whatever you want to call it. Great song, by the way. I'm not sure we're here to do much at all.
So then why do we do science? Because we're going to die anyways.
Why do we do it?
Yeah.
I think we're an advanced being. I think we're curious.
But wouldn't it be better to be an advanced being, just a roach? A roach doesn't concern itself with science.
Say that again.
Wouldn't it be better
Roach
just
is
to be
mad.
a roach? I mean, you think about it. Yeah, we are advanced.
Well, advanced in certain capacities,
Sure, yeah.
not so advanced in others.
But wouldn't it be better? I mean, doesn't that advancement cause a certain degree of anxiety? And-
no, it definitively does.
Yeah, and so from an evolutionary point of view, there's a lot of stuff that goes into making this, and energizing this brain of ours. Wouldn't it have been much easier, much more economical, just to?
It depends on who's determining that, though.
Well, there's no one determining it.
Well, I mean, if there is an entity determining that, let me give you an example. Sharks, for example, or elephants, or a lot of animals in the sea in particular, have defense mechanisms, much more advanced immune systems, much better communication methods, more advanced communication methods with whales, for example, or dolphins, or birds, certainly,
Right.
if you've ever seen them in major flocks.
Right. Big bird.
Right, yeah, thousands of them together in a symphony of organization, right? That are, so maybe I should back off a little bit and say that maybe we're not the most sophisticated, but we seem to have a higher level of conscience, maybe, which drives curiosity, which a cockroach can't do.
Right.
But that, hypothetically,
but
although they do, seem to live forever
and be happy.
and be, well, yeah, they're happy.
Happy as a cockroach can be, right?
Yeah, I suppose they
Till
can.
the Orkin Man shows up.
Yeah, or my shoe. But
Yeah, but you know what's funny about that is that we can come up with mechanisms for, for elimination, but not entirely. You cannot get rid of the cockroach. You're not going to get rid of the cockroach. It's not even a Band-Aid on a wound.
right.
You're just satisfying your consumer desire to not have them crawling over you in your home, right? Because they're seen as nasty and dirty and so on and so forth.
They're
But
prehistoric too.
Yeah.
for prehistoric. I mean, there's still dinosaurs here, for God's sakes.
Maybe their design is better than ours because they can survive longer.
That's why I was saying arguably we're not the most sophisticated. I do believe that we have a combination of conscience and communication that in some cases supersedes, which is why we're the king of the animal world, if you want to look at it that way. But aside of that, I'm not sure, and we'll discuss this in the next segment here. We'll get more into the philosophy and maybe the religious component of it. But Kirk, since we kind of, let me ask you,
Yes.
do you think that do you think that what you're looking at is real? That was the conspiracy theory question. Here's the issue. I'm not saying it isn't. I believe it is, but you can't touch it. You can't touch the moon. You can't even lift over 8 feet, right? So you're assuming that all of this actually is up there.
Yeah. I've seen lots of pictures.
Right. Who's to say it actually exists at all? Right.
Well, then we get into that matrix reality thing. But I think if you actually believe that, I think you actually have a psychological disorder that is really bad, and you probably need to be locked up for a little while.
So what are you saying?
Just saying. I mean, some days it feels unreal. I mean, when you're in a hard day and you're getting your butt kicked and, stuff isn't going right, you're like, man, and especially if things just aren't, they just aren't lining up. You just go, this is the bad place.
Well, it raises the question: what's real, right? I mean,
We're told it's real.
sure, but
What was the movie with Jim Carrey where he was living in an alternate?
Something almighty.
no, it was the game show or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, something to
I
that
never
effect,
saw
where
that,
he actually
yeah.
lived in a television show. I think
So,
it was.
yeah, something like that.
Some kind of alternate reality, if you will. You know, all I'm suggesting is not one of us has touched the star, not one of us has gone to the moon, not one of us has done any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's all based on education, assumption, belief,
Mm-hmm.
hypothesis, theory,
Right.
hope that there's something greater.
And so the
Right.
question is, what justifies that belief? Is there evidence? Right. So I don't see, for example, the electron spinning around in this microphone, but yet, do I want to say it's real? I kind of want to say it's real, but I don't see it. What I see is a composition in a vague sense. But I guess the question is, what do we mean by real here?
Okay, so let's bring it back down to earth,
Okay.
literally, like you just did, and say, let's forget about the sky for a second. We believe this microphone to be in front of us right now. It makes it a little bit more believable because I can touch it and I can feel it, right? But that's just another series of senses, if you will, that are adding to that reality. It's difficult when you can't. People tell you the stars are there and this is where they are, and these high-performance scientists are saying this is actually existence, and I believe it's probably true, right? But it's a belief. Hear my words.
Right.
Believe. I believe that to be true.
But then the question is
It
that,
also could be a lot of propaganda.
yeah, but is that belief justified? So, for example, I believe that it is probably 7 something, right? I don't know what time exactly. I don't have a watch on me, but what would justify that? Well, I could look at my watch or cell phone and see what time it says. Is that evidence? If it says 7 whatever, what if the clock died? And it just happened to die at 7:15, and let's say it is 7:15. Is that justified belief? So I believe that there's a microphone in front of me on the basis of what? What evidence? Well, my sense experience, right? I believe that there are stars and moons and all these astronomical realities on the basis of what? Well, in a certain degree, you would say sense evidence, right? I mean, I see them.
That's one sense.
In one sense, I've been told about them. Is that evidence? Well, I would have to evaluate the competence of the person giving the testimony. I would have to evaluate the likelihood that this person is not trying to deceive me. I think that's where it becomes a bit more complicated in terms of verifying things that I have no direct access to. But I think we have to live in a way in which we say, look, I've never been to China, but I believe China exists. Why? I know Chinese people. Everything's made in China. So either the entire world is conspiring against me, that China, to make me believe China exists when it doesn't, but it's more likely and probable, economical, that it does.
So the conclusion being, and I think we all feel the same way in this room, that the universe and the stars and all that do exist. I'm simply pointing out that the empirical evidence is more difficult to digest,
absolutely.
given that you can't touch. You can't use your other senses in order to verify. And I'll give you an example. If you go into any particular judge or jury, right, and you present the exact same case, right, 50-50, you're going to come out with different outcomes each time, even if we bring experts to the room. And one expert is going to say this, and one expert's going to say something else. So then it comes down to, what do you believe? I mean, you see what you see. That's one of your senses. Then what do you believe in? Do you believe it is there? Okay. Most people do. Right. I'd say 90% plus of people believe that the stars exist and that the universe exists and so on and so forth. And I guess we just go with that. Whether it's expanding, as they say, particularly at an accelerated rate, which is new information, right, within the last year and a half.
It's been known for a while, I think, but still relatively new.
The pace of the pace of the acceleration of the universe is greater than
what you would expect.
They once thought it. Science is in its infancy, and it's fascinating. to see and hear about the new things that they find out all the time, all the way down to is Pluto a planet or not?
Right.
You know,
It is.
is it now a planet again?
Well, that's what I was taught when I was 9, so it is. It was
Right,
on my
no,
poster on the bedroom wall.
Right. There's a solar system,
That's right.
and therefore it is. We'll take a quick break, and I'd like to hear more about what you do.
Sure.
Sounds good.